After the last big build in the city with the beach hotel resort, the city's ready to expand and meet its education needs. So today, we're going to develop this patch of land and create a compact college campus. I'm going to be utilising a few assets not usually associated with a college build. In addition to them, I'll be taking advantage of Anarchy and Move It to create some custom blocks, and we're going to create a few nice detailed points of interest using some of the new props that are now at our disposal. So let's crack on. Before getting on with the campus, I need to address the lack of fire protection for this side of the city. For now, I'm going to plop down a fire station over here, and as luck would have it, we've hit milestone 11, big city, and with that we get almost $3 million added to the city coffers, and they are very much needed right now. The very first thing I want to do is to sort out the terrain. So initially I'm looking to create a flat area which will make up the bulk of the build. It'll have the bigger assets and it'll have the main plaza as well. We can create a terraced effect by creating some lower elevation areas here where we're at it. And I've got a fairly clear idea on the orientation of the main college building. I very much want it at the highest elevation overlooking the rail lines and the highway, and I want a clear drop in elevation here, so I'm going to create a key wall terrace wall right at the back. The wall is going to be parallel to the main building, so I'm going to pull some paths out at 90 degrees, and we're pretty much good to go, quite straightforward. Convert this thing over to a key wall, and then we're going to drop the terrain down here, and that'll roughly give us the look I'm going for. Obviously we can fine tune this, and we'll be terraforming later on obviously. With the straight section in place, I'll extend it with some wavier sections at each end. This can be transformed later to smoothly taper into the higher ground and join up with the main path network later down the line. I'm going to lay out the main plaza here, and really it's just an outline. The main inspiration for the plaza here is going to be the University of Louisiana in Lafayette. Hope that's the right pronunciation. It'll not be a one-to-one recreation, but the layout is going to be very, very similar. Now with the main plaza marked out, I'm going to jump into dev mode and grab a university asset. This won't be functional in game, but I felt that the build did need some standout buildings at the entrance, and this kind of fits the build quite nicely. I want to get this centered up nicely with the main college building at the back, and again, looking at the real life university layout, I'm going to create a little roundabout at the entrance. There's actually parking here on the real life one, but the scale of it won't work out with the scale of this building and what I'm trying to do here. So we're going to do a few other bits and pieces for the parking. Get this connected up to the main road, and then we can crack on with the first of the custom blocks. Now again, drawing inspiration from the University of Louisiana, I wanted to create some custom red brick blocks of buildings. It's pretty tight here for space, so I'm just going to do a layout that makes sense for this space. And after spending a lot of time going through the assets and the various colours, I landed on this level 5 1x2 North American row home. It's got the red brick effect I was looking for, so that's going to be close enough for me. It's certainly closest I could get to what I was after. After creating 2 rows back to back with matching colours, I'll select the second block with Move It, and we're just going to push it back to back with the first block. With these buildings in place, I'll just draw a road back in so it connects to the services, electricity and plumbing. And I want to complete the blocks by having a windowed effect on each of the ends. So there, I'm going to be manually placing 3 more row homes, getting the middle one in as central as possible first, then plopping 2 each, 1 at each side at consistent angles. Once you've got them in place, you can just shift the middle one back or forth as required, and the rows at the ends will require a road to function again. Then that's all that's left to do, is just add a bit of vegetation and soften the whole thing up a bit. I'm going to create a road layout with smaller alley roads. I'd like to have this all pedestrian access only, but the pedestrian roads are just far too wide for what I'm trying to create here. It will still look pretty walkable once the Sims have moved in and the traffic dies down. Here now, it's just a case of using the same assets, same colours and the same technique to create a network of college buildings. There'll be various sizes here, but we are going to be creating something of a repeatable and consistent design throughout. If this is your type of Cities Skylines 2 content and you enjoy it, can I ask you to drop a like and a comment? That engagement from you helps the performance of the video as it helps it get pushed to more viewers. That support is always very much appreciated. Also very much appreciated on my Patreon and YouTube members. Your support means so much to me. Thank you very much. Now that's looking pretty good. Obviously that's going to be needing to be tidied up a bit and detailed later on, but as a starting point, getting the buildings written and ready and ready for that detailing, I think I'm pretty happy with it. Later in the build I'm going to extend that colour scheme with some props and fencing, which will help bind everything together. So let's crack on with the rest of the buildings on the other side of the campus now. The first thing I want to do is move the fire station over from where we dumped it at the beginning of the video. This will serve as a campus chapel, so really I want it in the heart of the campus. So much like we did in episode 1 of Cape Lomond, we're going to use the dev tool and we're going to remove the fire station signage and make it somewhat passable as a chapel. It will not stay in that position looking over the main plaza, but I want it there now so I don't forget to incorporate it in the build. The next asset I want to introduce is the Rockstars Mansion. This asset is going to be our president's residence. So having a look at some of the US universities, they all seem to get a pretty sweet house with a job, so this little campus isn't going to be any different. Really nice asset this, and it matches the look of the college pretty well too. I'm going to stick it over here for now until I make my mind up on the final positioning later on. The bulk of the buildings left to do will be basically accommodation blocks. I'm going to use the same technique that I showed you earlier to create single blocks with row homes. Pretty simple. I don't want windows at the end of each custom block though. I am trying to create something of a planar decorated effect for these, something a little bit less expensive looking to house the students, you know. From a layout point of view, I'm going to break things up a little by taking some off at different angles, and this will help give us some non-standard shapes to detail a little bit later on in the build. Again, that's pretty much how you make the blocks. I'm going to make 4 or 5 of these. Exactly the same technique, so I'm going to kind of skip through this bit a little bit. I'll keep enough in just so you can get an idea of the layout and how we go about the terraforming, but the actual making of the blocks, you know how to do it by now. Most college campuses will have some sports facilities, and again we're going to do the same here. I'm not going to go too wild on this one. I'm just going to use the in-game football stadium. This is a small college, it's not a big university, so I think a modest facility is what's in order here. Terraforming is key for the building on a slope. I'll need enough space for the road network, and I do plan on squeezing some more accommodation and commercial down here too as well. Building on different layers of height always creates a little bit more interesting developments, so you know, get creative yourself and make the most of those tools. If there is a big jump in height and you don't want to develop on it, then paving or roads with key walls are a great choice to accentuate changes in elevation. Don't go too mad with it though, keep it modest, try and keep it a bit realistic. The key walled paths also give some great opportunities to create and expand your pedestrian walkway networks as well, which is always very welcome. So we've ended up with nicely spaced out accommodation blocks here and over 3 different elevations, which is pretty nice. The start of the pedestrian network can be clearly seen, and there'll be lots of opportunities to get that connected in different areas of the builds as we go along. Going to spend a little bit of time hooking up some of the roads and our paths. It will require a little bit of smoothing out on the terrain where we want to create these connections, but pretty straightforward, slope and smoothing tools all the way for this one. Now's the time to introduce a bit of zoning. I want to create a couple of pockets of commercial here, and I'm not too fussed what gets zoned in. I'm more focused on getting buildings in here that fit the scale of the development, and I'll take the opportunity to add to the path networks as and when it makes sense. Now this college is going to need some administration buildings. Interestingly, the demand was indicating that there was no office demand, but when I plopped them down they become occupied straight away, so that was a welcome bonus. A little mix of smaller office buildings and maybe one big central office should look the part here. I think these buildings set apart from the others is a pretty good fit, so I'm going to rock with that. Now I'm going to revisit the highway network, and I did notice that the parklow here was struggling a bit. I did mention on a previous episode when we were building this that might well be the case, so now's the time to convert it from a B2 to a B4 parklow. And it's easy stuff, just a case of adding on-ramps on the approach with this particular variation. I'm not mad about the aesthetics of the southbound on-ramp, so I might do a bit of a redesign in a later episode, but for now this will get traffic flowing quite a bit better. And really the main issue here with this ramp in is that the amount of traffic looking to turn left immediately after entering the arterial road, but we'll kick that can down the road for another day. For now, I'm going to use the 5-way asymmetric road, so it gives uninterrupted access to the arterial from the on-ramp. It might not be pretty, but it does work. After expanding the path network a bit more, it's time to rejig the president's residence, i.e. the Rockstar's mansion. Situating it directly alongside the college seemed a natural fit, and the two assets complement each other pretty well. It almost looks like a natural expansion or an upgrade for the college, so that's pretty cool. One actual upgrade I wanted to add was the library. This will give our students a higher chance of success to graduate. It's definitely one I want to get in. Having a healthy office demand really does boost the city finances, and providing higher education is key to the success here, so spend your money on your colleges and your universities. Having this situated at the back of the main building matches up with the residence building, and it does give a little bit of balance to the build. I think the addition of these two really helps create an eye-catching landmark for those on the lower rail and the road networks. So it should look pretty good as you're driving by on your highway or you're sitting on your train. In terms of the big stuff, we're set. I'm super happy with the layout, and let's on to the detailing now, and there is a lot to it. The first thing I want to do here is to create a custom layout for the side of the college that overlooks the lower ground, so around the back. So I'm going to replace the paving with the different textures here, then we'll extend it to the viewing area or the key wall out at the back, and we'll connect it to the networks at the front towards the plaza where we're at it. It will really help give the illusion that this is all just one big connected asset. Where the paths don't naturally fit, I'll create some invisible paths and I'll make the whole place walkable. I definitely recommend you do this in your own builds. It is entirely satisfying watching the Sims go about their business in your modified assets and your networks. Using the replace tool, I'm going to change out some of the trees for palms for no other reason other than just making the build look a little bit different, from the vanilla options. We're on to the main plaza now. So, main layout is what we're going to work here. Again, I'm going back to University of Louisiana for inspiration here. There's an interesting area layout on their main campus, and I'm absolutely going to lean into that. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to create the red path, so that would have been really nice with the red brick buildings and the detailing that we'll get onto soon. But the layout was sufficiently interesting, so I'm going to do my own little recreation here. This is pretty eye-catching, and I think a fitting centrepiece for the build. Now this is nowhere near done, but I think you're getting the idea of what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm going to use the brush tool and fill some select areas around the campus where it makes sense, but I'm still going to leave a few empty areas. Remember, you don't need to fill every single space in your city. Some open spaces are very welcome, both in-game and in real life. It does make a difference, so choose them carefully. Now here I'm just going to continue to build out the hedges. Again, we're almost extending the existing gardens if you like, and giving that impression of a bigger build, especially once we get the surfaces in place here as well. Let's take stock of where we are so far. The gardens are coming along quite nicely. I think we are done with every building that's going to be going into this campus now. And I think we've ended up with a nice mix of shapes and colours within the development, and keep things interesting on the eye. I'm pretty happy with the path network and some of the vegetation so far. Still lots of opportunities to detail a little bit more, but yeah, we're happy with this so far. In the real life university, you'll find a covered walkway or an arcade that runs through the middle of the campus. I definitely wanted something similar in this build. Initially, I built it with a roofed pathway, but I realised with a bit of time and consideration I could create my own. So the one that I'm showing you here getting built will be getting deleted shortly. I've got a much better idea. At this point I want to tidy up some of the hedging around the main buildings and start on the plaza fencing. I've found something that resembles red brick, which is perfect. Then it's just a case of stretching it out with the line tool, making sure the colour's right here and matched, and then we'll plug some gaps with single placements. It takes quite a bit of time, but it's definitely worth it. I know with the extra landscaping tools that are coming, there's going to be some cool features for fences that will make life an awful lot easier for this sort of thing, so looking forward to that. In addition to the plaza sort of park area, I'm going to box off the whole development with the same fence asset. So same colour again, does look quite nice actually, and it does help to box things off quite nicely here, doesn't it? Once the fences are done, I'm going to run a little mini time lapse. It'll only be about a minute or so. I'll cover some of the vegetation detailing as well as the expansion of the garden areas looking over the highway. When I'm back, I'll show you guys a couple of cool little detailing ideas you can incorporate in your city builds. After adding in some more detail with trees and benches, I'm going to pick a few spots to add some more interest. This little area will be perfect for a bike rack build, so adding an appropriate surface, I'm going to box it out with the same wall again, going to leave a gap for access, and then get the bike rack props in place. With them in place, you can finish off with a little sign and some bins, and I think we're good to go. Quite simple, but looks pretty nice, huh? Another little detail and opportunity can be found around awkward zoning spots. So take this commercial asset, for instance here, I'll box it off with some hedging. Pull the surfaces out to fit our newly boxed off area. Then we'll add some appropriate vegetation and a few props. And once you're done, you're left with something that looks an awful lot better, and ultimately it's a more natural fit to its surrounding areas and networks. There we go, that looks like a much more natural fit, doesn't it? After spending some time trying to find the most appropriate assets for the arcade element of the build, I've landed on these two. I've got a higher red fence which seems the closest to the brick arch, and I'm going to be using this pergola as well. Now I couldn't find any red ones, but you can only work with what you've got. Combining these assets with a path network underneath should hopefully give us a roofed custom walkway that we can incorporate into the main campus build. I'm going to run the fencing down the length of the plaza and then right the way down to the main entrance at the roundabout. I'll be leaving a few gaps here and there for walkways as I go along. For the roofed element, it's just a case of running that pergola asset along the newly erected fencing, and after a bit of tidying up and filling gaps, with Anarchy enabled, you can run the path directly underneath the canopy. It will, for the main part, connect automatically to the existing networks, but you might have to play about with it a little bit. The path network stuff can be a little bit fiddly, especially when you've got props in the way, but where there's some janky sections, you can cover it over with a little bit of the surface tool if necessary, maybe a bush or a bin or whatever you want, you know, to hide any ugliness. In the main part, it works. The Sims are using it. The plaza's ready now for a bit of detailing soon, now that the big stuff is in its place and out of the way. I want to give the dorm or the accommodation buildings their own unique feel, so I've used a different combination of landscaping assets here. That said, each little subsection will have the same assets used, but we'll arrange things slightly different in each of those subsections. Not doing anything too crazy here, so just going to pop this on a short time lapse. But when we're back from that time lapse, I'll show you how to make a cool garden tunnel with a leafy roof that's completely functional, so stick around for that. Catch you up in a minute. There are two parcels of land here that I've gone ahead and fenced off using the same assets and colours as the main plaza fencing. I've popped some basic paving in here already, good to go for detailing, and I'm going to show you how to create a walkable bush roofed walkway using Move It. The first thing I'm going to do is to get an idea of the height using the pergola. So step one is just to lay this over the path using the line tool. I'm going to line this on both sides with a small tree of my choosing. Doesn't really matter what you use here, to be honest, whatever you think looks good. I think that on its own actually looks pretty nice, but let's add the roof. I'm going to lay out a couple of lines of bushes on the ground nearby. I'm looking to get it roughly the same length as the tunnel. Now it's not a big deal if it's too long, you can always delete part of it later. So just select all the bushes with Move It. Raise it up using Page Up. Then you can rotate and move it into place with your mouse buttons. Again, you can move up or down with Page Up or Down until you're happy with the overall placement. This is just a small one, but there's lots of opportunity for some cool designs with a little bit of imagination. So I'm going to crack on and finish off these parks. Again, I'll pop it on a short time lapse and then I'll catch up with you in a minute or two for the build review. Alright, so let's have a look at what we've ended up with today. I finished up on the main plaza detailing, but I forgot to record it, didn't I? So I'll quickly talk you through it. I've tried to keep things as minimalistic as possible, but still looking interesting. So I added just a few trees, some big oaks, some apple trees, and I've used some lines of flower beds to accentuate the linear elements of the path network. And in the middle of the plaza, I've sparingly used some more props, so park lights, seating, we fenced off the fountain, and we got again a couple of flower beds to add to the theme. The view from the rail line from the north gives us a good view of the natural grass areas at the front that can be accessed through the path network. We can get a good look at the palm lined retaining wall with the extended college gardens directly above. And I think boxing in the gardens with the extra hedging has definitely given some additional definition to the extra path networks we created earlier in the build. As we move along, we can see further drops in elevation as we head towards the football stadium. I'm really happy with the way the red brick blocks turned out. The basic commercial assets, the car parks and a little bike rack facility help give the area a bit of character, and all the trees and the little mini oaks soften up the whole thing as well. Coming in from the west of the campus, you can check out the detailing on the accommodation blocks and get a really good view on how the chapel, the commercial assets, parks and the offices all fit into the overall build. We can take a little close-up look at the arcade walkway that would be giving our students and staff some respite from the non-stop sun we get here in Cape Lomond. All that fencing for the plaza and the park were definitely worth the time and effort. The mini park areas with the fountains and pergola walkways look really nice, super happy with those ones. I think they look equally as good with or without the flower roofing actually. The college president's residence or Rockstar's mansion is a great fit here beside the main college building. Matching up the objects such as the hedging and the trees blend this asset in quite beautifully into the build. Really happy with how that sits in here. So I'm going to leave you guys with a few more shots of the build to enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.